This episode of Fuel the Fire TV podcast is brought to you in part by Kickaboo Meat Seasoning. Go to kickabooshops.com and enter the promo code FTFTV for 10% off all products and seasonings.
All right, so welcome to Fuel the Fire TV's podcast. I'm here with two of my most favorite people. One of them is Jesse, and you know Jesse, he's our producer for the show. And the other is Derek Debassige. He's a family member of mine, my brother, my younger brother. And he's a force to be reckoned with on Manitoulin Island. And welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Finally. And actually, you know, he says finally because when we did our list, when Jesse and I did a list of, okay, you know, who are we going to have as our number, 20 guests, you were at the top of the list, and it's taken a few months for you to have a little bit of free time to actually come and do the podcast. So we appreciate that. Because you're a busy guy.
Yeah,
right?
Well, doing it at 11 p.m. in our pajamas is the way to do it. So.
That's the way to do it. Actually, it's the second podcast this week that we've done. I've done it this hour, and it seems to be that magic hour of everybody has a little bit of time late in the evening after your kids go to bed. You've got two little ones, my niece and nephew, Drew and Nova. So they keep you running, I would imagine.
They do. They're busy kids. They set their goals high, I think, and when it comes to their interests, the lists are long. They're really positive little kids. They just came. They were unwrapped that way. It wasn't necessarily something that it was from day one, and it's an influence that is a phenomenal one to have around because it's today, for example, it's snowing out there, and I'm thinking, oh man, it's snowing. I gotta get the this driveway plowed and this parking lot plowed, and clear off this stuff, and hopefully the guys show up to shovel first thing this morning. And Drew's got his eyebrows where he wears them, right underneath his hairline, and he's let's get outside. I want to be out there 10 minutes early to wait for the bus to do what I need
Jump
to do.
in some snowbanks.
Exactly. It's snowing.
Play King of the Hill.
Holy man, it's snowing. Let's get out there. So it's a nice perspective to have a lot of the time. It helps to remind you what's the what the focus should be, because it oftentimes can get away, as opposed to just, hey, this is a beautiful morning this morning. So
absolutely keeping you grounded. So the piece that's pulling your time is obviously the clinic, right? And
Sure.
Derek manages a physio clinic, owns and operates with his wife Joanna, who is no question the better half of that relationship.
No question.
I remind them that every anniversary. But the Manitoulin Physio is tell us a little bit about this much needed project that happened, 10 or whatever, how many ever years ago that you started it, bringing it to the island.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of a loaded question, because I think that the first thing that pops out is this thing that happened, and that's kind of its origins were, I would say, just ideas that kind of one thing after the other. It was like most businesses, I think you start out with a 3-month plan, a 6-month plan, where you're going to be in this period of time, simply, if nothing else, just because of the finances and cash flow of it, of how we're going to make this work and float over that period of time. Once you let go of your whether it's a public sector job or your main income, and you decide to go at it full steam, having some semblance of a plan was basically what everybody was telling you to do, and you don't really feel that the imperative element of that until, you know, a few weeks in the first few bills, and you realize that nobody's really sending you that bi-weekly check at that point in time. It really and it really did just kind of, I would say, happen. You know, we formulated a plan, and we had, you know, even consultants come in and say, okay, well, you know, there's this kind of marketplace at this in this population, but realistically, I thought, you know, well, you know, there's more than that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have started it in the first place. But you know, the original projection was there's enough work on Manitoulin over and above what was already happening here for another part-time physio. I mean, we're 17, 18 full-time staff at this point in time. So, and it got there really quick. So, you know, within 6 months, we had kind of met our 3-year plan. Within the first year, we had kind of, within the first year and a half, we were at our 5-year goals. So from that point forward, it's been trying to keep up with the growth, really, with the progress of the project. So.
And why do you think, where does that need for growth? Is it because we're in more pain? I know I'm in more pain most mornings. I feel that, but I think that's just an age thing. And but why do you think the need is so high in terms of you know, that necessity for? Do people want to get better, or is it they're more in tune, or is it there's actually more pain?
I don't think it's just necessarily pain. I think the approach, I mean, we look at a lot of different businesses. We work with a number of other businesses. We're coached by some, we coach others. We cross mentor, you know, other businesses. And I have, you know, I would say on any given week, there's a few colleagues and business owners in other areas of the province and of the country where, hey, we're just dropping ideas and joking around and, you know, trying to help each other navigate the variety of different things that we're doing. And I think one of the common threads with some of the closest elements within my network are you know, how you get to that point and what the need is truly just understanding what the needs are in the community, regardless of size, where you're in. So, you know, we had I didn't start in private practice. I started for a number of years working for another organization across the North Shore of Manitoulin and across the North Shore of Lake Huron. And one of the things I learned there, it was really a kind of a baptism by fire, because I took a job. It was close to home. It was exactly what I was looking for in terms of location, but I can't necessarily say I truly understood what I was getting into early. And you show up and they said, go do physio. And I said, okay, where? And they said, okay, well, we've never had physio before. It's never been a part of the team before. We don't have a referral strategy, and you don't really have a place to work, but we need you to start 5 physio clinics in these 5 communities in this period of time. And it's kind of a pilot. So we got to have some outcome measures over that period of time. So it was,
so giddy up.
Yeah. So go to work and you know, you figure it out, because we haven't done it before. So, and we had some great people to work with there. It was a really supportive team. And I think one of the cool things that I learned there, in retrospect, at the time, it was kind of a little more like just excited to be doing your job, but at the same time, you know, struggling with the daily grind and the travel and all those things. So the understanding that I got there, one was from a leadership perspective, just kind of the freedom that I was given and how valuable that was to just work on the things that, well, you talk about passion a lot, but, you know, work on the things that I was passionate about within the context of what the needs were. So, and matching that as I went along. So once I think that I had the respect and I had the trust of leadership, and they knew I was pursuing it in a good way, in a way in which that we kind of, you know, hope health professionals are looking at their roles. They, you know, I had kind of a, I wouldn't necessarily say a free reign, but it was open to say, okay, how do you think we should do this?
You can design it from the ground up.
Yeah. Yep. And so our first responsibility what are the needs? What needs to happen, right? Okay, well, seniors need care in their homes,
right?
In a rural environment. You can't, we need to be providing outpatient accessibility in communities as opposed to, drive here, drive there. School support services for children with disabilities needs to happen in those schools,
in
not
the school,
in the next school over, in the next community, or in
right.
those types of
yeah.
things. So once you start to understand what some of those core needs were, and I think it also helps to be a reflective individual and understand what, like most things, you need to be able to do those things for yourself first, is understand what your needs are and be in that place yourself. So, and for me, being back on Manitoulin was a big part of that. Being back close to the water and feeling like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be, and now, and you're grounded again. Then it allowed us to really open yourself up and kind of be, that seventh direction teaching and looking inward and reflecting on what you're doing. So, really, I guess in a roundabout way, the answer is understanding what a needs-based service truly is, and understanding what your partners need, what the referral base needs, what the clients need. And from that spawned what our mission and vision is now, which is essentially to offer everybody that needs our services access at one door, regardless of whether it's an extended health benefit, private insurance. We're essentially a private clinic, but we partner with public services, with all of the different sectors, and try to offer not just outpatient orthopedics, but everything the community needs: concussion services, pelvic health, all the specialized services that would otherwise only be accessible privately. So once we set down that path, growth was just, it came around it was just a kind of a constant, I guess, and it still is now. It's amazing to me, and even to some of the businesses that we work with, and the idea of being singled out as kind of that's the unicorn, that's the one we've heard of like, how have you guys done all of that in such a small community and generated that kind of business there? And it's simply because, hey, the needs are there, and we're in a position to say, how do we service them all? So
right. What would you say? And the need is there, and I think the team that you've assembled, being able to hand pick your next best employee is a great way to build a team, right? And I know you guys have done that really well, and I use the service, and I've had, like I said, I've had multiple reasons to go, and I remember going there, and one of your senior employees told me and said very specifically, okay, so I want you to know before I do this that when I help take away the pain, part of the will for you to do it on your own is going to leave as well. And it stuck with me because it's that whole introspective look that your team was able to instill in me, to say, listen, you're the biggest solution to your own problem here. You just have to be in the right headspace and have the right attitude to go about doing it. And that's hard. I mean, I get it. I mean, it's the mental piece is hard, and you guys are great at doing that. But I think it's very unique. It's unique in your logo. It's very much a balanced approach to overall health, right? Not just why I'm there, right?
Yeah, and I think physiotherapy is an interesting I won't say outlier in the healthcare scenario, but it's one of those situations where first off, everybody coming, for the most part, is coming not just because they may be ill or they may think there's something wrong, or it's pain, mm-hmm. right? So, and pain is a really powerful motivator.
Absolutely.
So, but realistically, oftentimes we do have to recontextualize, because people are motivated to come by pain, and they think that that's the reason they're there. is for us to help them with their pain. And really, what we're there to do is, part of it is to recontextualize that, are you really here because of your pain, or are you here because of your function, right? Pain motivated you to get here, but it's really the function that you've lost that you're here to get back.
I want to play volleyball.
I want to. My shoulder hurts. It's I can't lift my arm.
Right.
Because of something wrong with it. Something, and pain is the motivator that got you there. Oftentimes, it's more of the motivator than the loss of function is. People will lose function and expect it to improve, and wait, but then oftentimes it's not until the pain gets to a certain point that they say, okay, I need to get help for this. So it's a little different than a lot of health professions in that sense, that it's not always necessarily that pain is the motivator, and sometimes it's a lot more acute in some professions, and sometimes it's a lot multiple steps away in that regard. So I would say, when we talk about growth as well as the approach, pain is a part of that. Pain is a part of growth. It's there's no shortage of it around. That said, the approach that we take, we really, as much as we you brought up the team, and I'd be remiss to say that we do have a kick-ass team. We start the day with some high fives and fist pumps, and it's not uncommon for whether it's our chiropractor or one of our physios, or even from the admin staff perspective, it's to let's everybody is getting better today. The long stare and the we try to get pumped up for the day, because everybody coming to see it is not at their best. Right. You're not getting depending on where your energy comes from as an individual, oftentimes it's not going to be that you're super motivated by the patient load that's coming to you. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, that happens from time to time, but generally speaking, people are not at their best. That's why they're there. Right. So you do have to kind of go into it with a certain mindset, and I think we definitely look for people that are rewarded by the progress and by the outcome and those types of things, and by the challenge.
But sometimes that's a way off.
Oftentimes that's a long ways off. And so we try to in the building part of team, we take med students, physio students, OT students, and one of the things we try to impart, and even with our own staff regularly, is very much a values-based approach, and steeped in some of our core traditional teachings. I think it's one of my lifetime and career goals in the healthcare profession was early before I really even knew what physiotherapy was going to entail when I was done, but setting a goal early was to, from my own personal experience and from a few kind of family member experiences, which is what we usually base those experiences on before we have clinical experiences, that I felt that what we now refer to as like a biopsychosocial model of healthcare, that wasn't common language 20 years ago to the same extent. These were emerging elements of things. Right. The idea of building a relationship with patients. Oftentimes, the white coat side of things was keep your distance, and the more common thread was the professional boundaries and those layers between you and whatever, as opposed to, hey, sometimes you cry together, those types of things. So, and it wasn't necessarily an empathetic approach, but I felt that our challenge is to, regardless of our knowledge base, in any pillar of healthcare or any stream of healthcare, I think our challenge is to infuse the interaction with common values, and I think we have a great tool to do that, essentially in the medicine wheel and in the 7 grandfather teachings. In that sense, is we challenge people to say, okay, what element of the medicine wheel is not spinning well? What part is out of whack? Is it, and obviously the physical side, but where is their strength and where is their weakness between physical, spiritual, and mental and emotional? And
where is it diminished? What
are we going to use to help them from their own outlook, from their we perceive and express ourselves among those in those 4 ways, and we all have our natural gifts. So where are they strong and where are they weak inherently, and how can we use either the weakness or the strength to motivate and to move them along, and what in a very short time, because oftentimes you might have 15-20 minutes, in an average follow-up scenario, maybe have a little bit longer in a new assessment, but really you're just meeting a person. You're just meeting a person, trying to understand all of that in a very short period of time. And I think the challenge, particularly with physio, more so than most professions, is, how often would you say, Jess, how often have you seen your family doctor in the last 2 years?
0.
Okay, and yourself?
Twice.
Okay, so I might see someone 8 times in 8 weeks. Right. So our window is different. And one of the things that we have to try to capitalize on is how do we set a hook, and you guys know how to do that. So, how do we create another point of intervention quickly with full buy-in immediately? And there's no better way to do that than to do it honestly, authentically, in a values-based scenario where immediately you trust what I'm saying and it makes sense to you, and I reach you, and we talk with eye contact, and, I choose the right moment and the right time to exchange physical touch and those types of things over the course of physiotherapy is a very physical thing, and essentially you're putting your hands on clients,
on people with pain,
on people with pain, in every interaction. So you have to do that really well, and that's something that as a new practitioner, they don't necessarily teach you that side of things. So we try to focus on that and how and walk people through scenarios of, okay, in this scenario, what value was missing? Okay, well, I wasn't very humble. One of the most common interactions that throw people off is not what I knew or I didn't know as a health professional. It's, you didn't treat me like I didn't feel like I was treated well, or I didn't feel like that individual was very humble. And a judgment call is made, and a Google review might be written, and all that stuff before you realize, hey, wait a minute, that guy's pretty good with a scalpel. So I think that part of it is a huge part of the team building scenario. Is ensuring that that's the case, and understanding that, hey, within 20 minutes, I think as a patient, I'm in the right place. This is where I need to be right now. So once that part is done and is done well and is done, in a very real way, next part that we ensure happens is the education element at whatever the level is of the individual in front of us. So that's a quick judgment call a lot of times. We do have some information to go on it, as they're coming in terms of the stuff that they've written, and how they communicate with us, and trying to get a sense of where they're at. Everybody's coming at it at a different level.
How descriptive they are, how they interact.
So all those are really quick calls that you have to make, and then you have to make sure that they understand it to the best that you can explain it, the best that you understand it, because not everything is clear cut as you'd like to think it is. And once you've done those few things, then you've likely created another point of intervention, meaning that person's coming back and you get another shot at it, right?
And they got a chance at getting better.
They got another chance at getting better. You got a chance at doing what you're trying to do, and feeling good about it.
And I think the reputation, I mean, in business, your reputation is phenomenal in this business, and that goes a long way, because people get referred and they're like, oh, well, you need to go see, and so that also carries a lot of weight. I think the building itself, both buildings that you guys, both the massage and the physio and chiropractic stuff, it feels like this is a place where you can get better. I mean, the ambiance of both of those places also carries some weight, as does the feel you get from the staff. And so I think it's like we said, it's a big need on the island, but it's a big need everywhere. And you've demonstrated that you could serve that population. I imagine it's hard. Physiotherapy is crazy hard to get into, and I imagine it's hard to recruit, right? Your new staff, but the level of influence that you've had on the island, it's hard to measure. other than it's large, right? In speaking of influence, what would you say, or who would you say, if it's a person, or what experiences, if they are experiences, would you say have influenced you most in to get to where you are now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, obviously, I think parental influence,
right,
valuing education, like you said, healthcare is one of those things that it's simply just not for everybody, even if you are one of those individuals, because it is, on average, you think of even NASM, for example, or med school or physio or whatever it happens to be, you get thousands of people applying, and everybody is eligible to apply, has these crazy averages after 4 years of university. And I think most people who have at least survived a first year of university understand, wow, that's not a hard thing, that's not an easy thing to pull off, regardless of what program you've gone into. So I think valuing education in the home, obviously having a value set, those things are imparted. And again, I don't think I came out of the womb that way. Those things are learned, and those things are entrenched. That's
the nurture part. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the first and most fundamental one. I think in business side of it, the idea of seeing it done, regardless of where that happens, and for us, it was, a little bit of us running a candy store when we were kids. Mm-hmm. It was seeing a business emerge and being run by parents while working in another stream, while working in another profession, and the work that takes. I think some of those early examples that become entrenched are very important. And I recently had someone approach me who isn't necessarily is someone that's really struggling, not by no means a health professional, but someone that's, that I've known for a long time, that was really struggling, that just straight up said, the fact that this is done here makes me think that it's doable, right? And I think it makes you think about all of those influence that you've had, of just seeing that little bit of something else done that no one else around you was doing. So there's that. I think it always helps growing up with a bit of competition. We've had our healthy competition, and I've always been competitive, and so older siblings, that's one of the things I think is that drive to compete. Helps to build determination and some of those other types of key elements that again, you have to experience and you have to live. A little bit of maybe wired already. I had from a business perspective, and this is kind of just popped in, into my head, and not necessarily one of the core fundamental influences in some ways, but the idea that seeing someone come back to the community and start a business from scratch, and work with that individual, was Ron Entz. Like Ron Entz, idea the idea of coming back and creating a bunch of jobs, and seeing it happen, and then also introduction to the restaurant industry. So I would say, having worked as a cook in a variety of different restaurants, the idea of timing and some of these other types of things, the idea of efficiencies and just how things are set up, organization, and seeing the value of those things over and over again, and sometimes blowing it. All of a sudden, you've got a dining room full of 70 people I've always valued the hospitality industry for that, particularly the restaurant side. It's interesting, you come into our building and you ask how many people around have worked in the restaurant industry, and some of our most talented staff have really talented backgrounds, and really positive experiences, particularly in either serving or cooking in the restaurant industry. And it's one of the things I actually ask in some of our screening scenarios, because I think it's just one of those experiences that it has a lot of different elements of the workforce that that it's and it is kind of a baptism by fire thing. Can you handle the pressure? Can you handle the stress? And how do you do when
and the responsibility? Yeah.
And do it all with a smile and do it all in a service-based mode, right? So that I think that was definitely an influence over the course of and I started working there when I was in grade 8, right? Doing dishes and worked there all the way through, and worked at a variety of different restaurants out there, but that one particularly stands out simply because it was here. He employed his whole family there for the most part, and has I think there's a legacy still now, despite the fact that he's passed away. That was a big one from a work perspective.
A hard worker, and I look back at the days that I slaved at Pizza Hut, and I still remember $3.10 an hour, and I don't think I've worked that hard since. Right, where you collapse at 3 a.m. in your bed with all your Pizza Hut, whatever Dacron, I don't know what it was, polyester, I don't know but you learn so much from that,
for sure.
Right?
And you have a cold iced tea at the end of one of those shifts, and you accomplish something. You fed a whole whack of people, and the kitchen's still clean, right? So those types of things,
That's a good example.
Were some fundamental elements. But education-wise, I think the influences there were. I had some friends ahead of me, both from a sport perspective, like playing a varsity sport and trying to balance that side of things out, and still seeing guys ahead of me do it, pull off those averages, come out of it as dean's honor list while putting in equal amount of time in the gym as they were putting in the classroom, and seeing 80% of the classroom not have that type of success and they weren't doing anything other than that. Those types of things I think were good to have some mentors along the way. And I think from a physio side, I still there's a lot of and the healthcare side, there are some individuals that I see that I definitely respect, that I feel that's the way it's done, but I can't say I would say from that side of it, I've actually had more fewer clinical mentors than I've had administrative mentors and leaders. And the individuals that have really shone in that have really been outstanding were the ones that basically said, okay, let's let this individual, let's line them up with what they need to be doing and let them go in that direction, and seeing leadership be a little more free flowing in that.
Tell them the what, don't tell them the how.
And just kind of provide some direction and provide some and let them do what they're not necessarily just what they want to be doing, but line them up within the context of what you need them to be doing. And,
they'll figure out that
some
best
of
line.
those things done was that were definitely some of the that helped me kind of get our team to the point where it is, where it's where we meet with individuals regularly, say how are things going. Okay, what do you want to do next? Well, I'm getting a little bit tired with pediatrics, and
what do you want to try?
And I'm really interested in maybe doing a little bit of this chronic pain stuff that I see you doing, and how do we? Okay, well let's start triaging the caseload a little bit different and filtering you out of this subspecialty and moving you a little bit into this, so people are constantly feeling that stimulation. And that's not my idea, that's what people have done for me, and so some of those influences early in my career, which I didn't acknowledge then, I didn't necessarily know what was happening then. At that time you think maybe we're just saying, okay, let's just try and keep them quiet by keeping them busy, maybe, when you have a motivated individual. But in retrospect, I think there's a lot more wisdom to it than that. So some of the leadership at the North Shore Tribal Council at the time definitely put a lot of faith and trust in me. I mean, those are, and we know what it's like here. You guys have served in political domains and in high-ranking scenarios in your respective fields in leadership capacities, and realistically, those are your communities, your people, your parents, your cousins, your kids, whatever it happens to be, and to be trusted with their families and their communities in that way was you feel a little bit more of the weight of it, and to you feel the responsibility that goes along with it. So lots of influences in the variety of different ways, but I think those are the ones that really stand out.
Awesome. And I the influence, and we're going to talk about sport, and I think because that's that's a big one. Being you went to Mac, and we both went to Mac, and you played ball there for 5 years, and I know your motocross, your illustrious motocross career was definitely you had some big motivation chasing me around the vet track. And I've got the pictures to prove it. I might actually just remind me to throw that up on Instagram. I've got a couple of roost pictures.
There's one picture out there. I think,
there's at least two.
It looks like you're ahead of me for sure in that picture,
but volleyball, big, like, so this was a huge part of your life, and it still is, because I'm helping out at MSS with Darcy's the volleyball team, and you've been doing it for 20 years, and been a big part of all of the banners that those guys have had over the last couple of decades. Tell me a little bit about that and the impact that it's had on you and on your life and on your direction.
First of all, what kind of person were you in high school? Like, what kind of kid were you in high school? Well, that's where I want to get to the meat and potatoes of first. Before we establish your volleyball career, I want to know what kind of person you were going into the gym for volleyball first.
You're gonna, if this was a live feed, there'd be the phones, I'm sure, would be lighting up with three callers. I know it.
Yeah,
they'd be like, pick me, honestly, I want to talk.
There were some influences in high school for sure, and I think one of the cool things in high school that I saw was really the cohort. High school was not, at MSS at that point in time, culture wasn't that great, and particularly the culture that those leaving high school when I came into. So the culture that you walked into late, having come back from high school elsewhere and coming into there, seeing a few young people, take school spirit seriously, to take it upon themselves to be agents of change in that environment, whether it's with students council or athletic associations, and those things were pretty cool, because that I saw, okay, wait, this can be different. This can be different by the time I leave, and I realized that early in grade 9, and got involved with things like the students or with the athletic association and some of those types of things, and volunteered time to organize intramural sports and some of those things. So and it's interesting you say that, because my wife and I have talked about this a lot, because she comes from a very different background, not an all First Nation school or whatever else, a private school, and it's a different some significant differences there, some significant pluses on both ends in terms of what we were exposed to for different reasons. Mm-hmm. But high school and really even, I'll back it up a little bit, because my elementary school was far more formative than high school was for me. By high school, I had some big shoes to fill. I think you hung out with a pretty cool group of kids that were very
super bright, super athletic,
that did really well, athletic group, and a diverse group. First Nations, none. From a cultural perspective, it was a pretty mixed bag. Which was a little different. So in elementary school, I did grade 1, grade 4, and grade 8 here at Lakeview School. I did grade 2, 3 in Shishiguaning in a one-room schoolhouse with grade 1 to 6. And people often ask, okay, so what was the most highlight element? And they're thinking, was it your time at McMaster and or your physio, post-grad, or your time in Australia doing, and those types of things in terms of your formal education. And honestly, those couple of years in Shishiguaning pulled it together for me early. I saw grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 in math every day. Grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 lessons in English every day, and started to realize there's a natural progression to where this is all going, as opposed to what my task is in front of me. And that was, I think, a really formative element. Switching schools a lot, because we also lived in London, Ontario for a period of time, and went from an all First Nation school to an all Catholic school, and it was a very different setting, a very different setting to walk into. And I remember having a conversation, and obviously, as much as we've always been here, and are members of the Chaging First Nation, we all realize how we identify, despite I'm sure all of us having our own identity crisis, like most people do in a multicultural society. The idea of going into a non-native school where I'm not just going to be, where the
not everyone knows you, not everyone knows where
exactly,
you come from, or your family
and
dynamic.
It was one of the things that my parents highlighted. He said, "Okay, you know what? You're just gonna walk into a scenario and everything's fine, right? It's gonna be a little different than where you're coming from in the past." And so, first day, and I missed the first day of school in that environment, and because I was trying to chase you guys down through the park and crashed into a parked car, broke my arm. Missed the first day of school because it's just busted my
Did $600 damage to the car.
Yeah, busted up the car pretty good too, and just destroyed a brand new 10 speed. So it was, but I mean, country bumpkin in the city, I guess, and. So missed the first day of school, so you're already going into a little more jittery because you don't get the same first day experience as everybody else does, and you've never even walked into the building before. And
mind he actually crossed a real busy street doing full tilt before he crashed. We lived on a hill and he went right down the hill.
It could always be worse.
It could have been way worse. Yeah.
So walked into that school thinking, okay, anonymity is finally mine. I'm just going to be a quiet kid in the class that's trying to figure out the lay of the land. Second day of school, and the teacher asked me to kind of come up to the front, and he says, "This is Derek Debassige. He's a First Nation person from a First Nation in Northern Ontario." I'm like, dude, come on.
What?
So it was an interesting scenario there, but and a much more diverse situation. It wasn't, it was a very multicultural school in that sense. So, so pressed by that interaction to make your friends and those types of things, and like any story of a young kid in a new school. But all of those experiences essentially, I think, come out of it at the end of elementary school, at the end of grade 8, being a lot more diverse than the average and a lot more adaptable, I think, than the average, having been in kind of, like I would say, very similar to what military kids, those types of things are just bouncing around a lot, and you either adapt or you just kind of shut down. So looking back at some of those birthday party pictures and those types of things, and realizing none of those individuals would have necessarily hung out together if there wasn't someone pulling them all together, right? So in high school, I think, there are always the distractions, I think, in high school. But realistically, I look back at it and think, for the most part, I hung out with everybody, and I played as many sports as I was allowed to, and missed a lot of school, all because of athletics and sport, and was involved and took the school culture pretty seriously. And I remember, I think it was in grade 11 or so, and volleyball really wasn't my, it wasn't, and it wasn't what I spent my hours and hours doing as a kid. It was basketball. It was that was my first passion, and just wore out basketball and rim and backboard and the whole deal in the driveway.
And back then MSS didn't have a basketball team, so volleyball was
didn't have the budget to foot the travel bill. So my goal was singular. My speech was pretty quick, and running for the Athletic Association, and I'm going to get a basketball team by the end of this year. And we put together a budget. It ended up getting shut down by administration because we only had essentially established kind of the funding for a singular year. But I thought, from a student's perspective, that was a pretty cool thing to have done, considering no one else had done it. And we had interest from the school, from petitions and all these types of things, and put a lot of effort into it. And I still, as much as we didn't get a team then, we did eventually, with some of the same mechanisms that funded there. I think it was those types of things I spent a lot of time doing, and then Ontario Scholar was a line in the sand for us, and I mean, like straight up war within the household if we didn't have the average. Our lives stopped.
Our lives would be drastically different right now.
There was no going out. There was no, there was no use of the vehicles. There was none of this stuff if we didn't have that average. So that was always the undertone is ensuring that as long as the marks are at least over 80, which realistically maybe was a little bit low of a bar, but considering the competition that came from the next few phases of education, but it allowed every door to be open for the most part at that point in time,
100%.
In terms of undergrad application and whatnot. So I'd say those were the things that I'm willing to talk about from high school. But for the most part, those are.
I think that whole the Trans Am stories, that's a whole another podcast maybe.
Very social though, at that point in time, high school here was I think the culture had changed a bit, and we were at a point where we were getting it was your chance to meet the rest of the island too, which I thought was kind of cool.
Because it opened up the doors.
And I would say many of the friends I have that are from those, at that point in time, it was, grade 13 and OAC years and those types of things. You had 5 years in high school. From anybody within those 5 years, you're still connected to in that way that we served at the same time. So
I thought, and I think, when I look back at that, and you were still a part of it too, was when Wiki didn't have its own high school, and I look at all of the friendships that I have still to this day with the cohort from Wikwemikong, who some of them are still really good friends, and that's a piece that is a little bit, and I get it, I get the whole assimilation bit, and I'm not saying that. I'm saying that those friendships that were allowed in high school because we got to know, the guys and gals from Wikwemikong, made me better, right? As a student and as an athlete, it made us more competitive, and so we're always trying to balance those and weigh those pros and cons of, yes, Wiki does need its own high school, but when I look at some of those things that really bind schools together, like sports, right? It's very hard to compete.
MSS was a better environment with a larger community.
With a larger community,
and that goes, like you said, we understand the reasons, we understand all those things, and Wiki is its own thing in that regard, and I definitely respect that. But my time was great there because some of the boys from out there that good friends, and it made it was a balancing force, having Wiki as part of that community, because realistically it was more reflective of the whole island then than it is now, I think.
And made for some crazy East-West hockey shootouts.
Some awesome times. And obviously, teams were better. We had more to pull from, and there were some phenomenal athletes from there. But and the other thing I will add, Jess, because I think that it's high school was. I had an influence. I mean, we were also a family with a lot of foster kids coming through our family and staying with us for short terms and long terms and those types of things. And one of the things that was really important to me early was the physical side of life. And I would say, most of my successes have come from learning and experiences that I've had in the physical domains in one way or another. And oftentimes sport was at the top of that list. So that was as much a goal of mine at that point in time. Now, I didn't necessarily care what it was going to be in terms of sport. I didn't want to just stop after high school. So when it came to, I was definitely out a lot, when it came to Friday nights and Saturday nights. But I was always driving for others and those types of things. So, in that side of things in high school, as much as I would say, very much a social butterfly in that regard, but very much the DD for, I would say, those for that entire time. So and some of that, why I brought up the foster side of things is because our other brother, Francis Ananaus, who's now an OPP officer. Seeing him go through the things, the life that he went through, and essentially, never touched a drop type of thing. I had a lot of respect for that at that point in time, and wanted to make sure that seeing seeing my friends go through what they were going through and their families go through what they were going through, I felt particularly from some of the stuff that he added to our perspective, that in order to get through the gauntlet with those goals still pursuable and still intact, that was a part that I thought might help a bit. So I kind of didn't embrace that side of the party environment at all, really in high school, university, whole other thing. But that gauntlet is not an easy thing to get through in small rural communities, and especially ours. So I would add that part in there, because I think it was a key component to
right.
coming out of it. Because regardless, there's lots of close calls of whether or not you get through that gauntlet.
100%.
And I think we've all had them, but realistically, that might have tipped the scales in my direction a little bit more.
Well, and I think the DD thing, both of us actually had that influence, and that was Mom, right?
Yeah.
Her dragging an axe out to the car and saying, if I ever, if you know what I mean, get you, right? I'll take this axe and I'll smash that car and I'll leave it there for you to clean it up. And I believed it, I mean, because she would have done it, right? Yeah. So there was that kind of added pressure too, sure. as well. Now you mentioned I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about basketball. You said basketball being a big influence, and we've gone to a lot of Raptors games, and I know you are a huge Raptors fan and basketball aficionado, because you watch the NBA religiously. I watch the Raps religiously, but you watch the NBA. So what are your thoughts? I mean, it's like the Leafs winning the cup for me is what I would imagine,
sure.
For you last year.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about that, but talk about this team of what you're seeing now.
This team's killing it.
The bench.
Don't get me wrong. As you bring up the idea of basketball. I think a lot of people are definitely, and we hear it, and I love it too. The idea that the sport has grown so much in such a short period of time is phenomenal. You look at the Canadian content in the NBA is just unreal these days. The kids, I watched a kid in OKC there, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander play in Toronto just a couple of weeks ago over the holidays, and he lit it up this talent is developed here.
Mm-hmm.
It's developed in Canada. These are Canadian-born kids that have honed those skills here and are now killing it. I think I fell in love with the game pretty early. It was just one of those things that you can do. It's one of those sports you can play young. You can get into young. Yeah. And I think the Raps. We've gone down to watch basketball since I was 16, basically back in the days of the Nabisco Classic, right? They have a preseason game with a quarter of the Sky Dome curtained off, basically, and have two NBA game teams come up and doing it. This is well before the Vancouver had a team and Toronto had a team. So to see it come in and follow the Raps from that point in time, from the draft of the first team being put together, some of those things to now. I was a big DeRozan fan. I've got a few DeRozan jerseys.
I was a huge DeRozan fan.
I love the way he plays. And I might be a little bit old school because the NBA's changed a bit, but I love the mid-court game. I love the idea that I can shoot from anywhere. All I need, if you give me a little bit of space, or I'm going to create that little bit of space and shoot from anywhere. So it's not just the three that happens now, right? But I love that part of that game, and I love the drive, and obviously the guy can throw down. As far as I'm concerned, he should have won a couple of dunk contests. It was just jumping over a car or some other gimmick that I think I think he was
robbed.
A celebrated athlete, but he had more to offer, and I think Western Conference player of the week this week. He can still light it up. His D, sometimes left a little bit to be desired, but at the same time, when a lot of people knew that I was a DeRozan fan, and when he was traded, people dude,
I did it. I said it too.
Yeah, I got so many texts that day, how are you handling this?
Yeah, and you're like, but we got Kawhi.
I'm like you don't understand what, because a lot of people, you're watching the Raps, and if you don't follow the whole thing, you're like, who's this guy?
And Kawhi hadn't played for a year,
like,
so it was
he's the guy that can shut down LeBron James a couple of years ago. He's, this is the guy that we're getting. He's that guy, and he's still getting better. And I don't know how long for whatever else. And don't get me wrong, sorry to see DeRozan leave, but unfortunately, it was time. The league is a business and whatever else. And
we needed.
I'm like, we are there, and I remember having a conversation with you, like we're on the cusp. And this was actually, as the playoffs were starting. I was traveling, and I was coming back from. I was in the airport. Coming back from Indonesia and sitting there tired and watching a little bit of the first bit of the playoffs this past year, and the guy comes in and he knew basketball. We were sitting beside each other. We were both traveling individually, just sitting having a beer and a burger while we were waiting for our respective flights. And he was Golden State. And I think he had played a little bit of college ball. I think he mentioned he was on like second string. I don't know, SC or something like that. Anyway, but. He's telling me this is gonna, your Raps are good, but I mean, this ain't gonna happen, man. It's Golden State. I'm like, you guys are an injury away from us taking you down. To think that was going to come to fruition, and you and I texting throughout the whole, whether or not we're watching the games or not, still kind of sitting there thinking that just really happened. This guy got injured, and then I'm like, the next injury. The next
injury was just.
I'm like, we got this is old. Like this is
it
now. This is it. We're gonna. I remember just saying to Joe at the time. My wife's a pretty big basketball fan. It's like, we're winning a chip. She just was like losing it, thinking, "Are you for real?" Because it's she often says like. We and my daughter Nova announces with me from the other coach right up until halftime when she's got to go to bed a lot of the times, but she'll be the first one to throw a moccasin at the TV and just lose it. She gets that from Joe's dad, I think, and a little bit from me, but so we're very much a commentating from the coach household, and Joe's oftentimes just like, you could do this. You could describe all of these injuries as they're happening, which a lot of people don't necessarily do, and kind of project, prognosis how long they're going to be out and that kind of stuff. So she's like, there's value in that because no one does that really well on TV, but just some of the calls, right? So, and saying it at that point in time was just seeing it was like, I kind of realized it before it happened that we were in the mix and we were, but realistically when they took out the way they did, the way they fought back against Philly was one thing. Mm-hmm. The way they held true despite the fact that realistically, even in my mind, you're not coming back from that deficit against Milwaukee. That doesn't happen in professional sports.
No way.
And you still have hope as a fan, and you still think, what about this? Well, maybe Giannis blows the wheel, not to wish hateful shit on anybody, but you're thinking, how does it happen?
Yeah, how does it happen? Something has to be catastrophic.
Yeah, and then just to see it get better and better and better, and to see this guy come out and do his thing, and to see all the rest of the team come out and do their things, and everybody thinking that it's Kawhi and not necessarily watching. People watch offense and dunks. They don't see what's happening on the defensive end and see what's happening from a coaching perspective. And have been coached even in sport at a high level to realize there's a lot going on out there as opposed to just a bunch of guys running around. So and to see realistically the guy at the head of it all putting it all together over such a long period of time and realizing that the depth doesn't just come from that team. It's the depth goes all the way to the 905 and the kids in the playground still trying to get to that point for open tryouts. That depth is one of the few things that the Raptors have that a lot of teams don't have in the G League. So it's phenomenal this year.
Who do you think is this year with the injuries that have happened and the people that have had to step in to fill those shoes? Who has been the most impressive?
Thing. You hear it often as a cliche in sport that injuries can be a blessing in disguise, and I think that's true for the Raps because none of those are.
Gasol gets a break, right?
Honestly, I'm not their trainer, and I respect those guys and what they do. But I'm fine keeping those guys. They're back now, and they're looking like they're full of piss and vinegar at this point in time. And but realistically, I'm okay if they nap a little bit longer till after the All-Star break and do some load management with those boys, because I'm going to see they know how to win, and they know how to win from front to back of that organization, I think. And those guys coming in have bought into the defensive strategy side of things and know their roles. And when you see 4 or 5 passes out there, whether or not they get the shot, those are high percentage shots that are like that's how you pull it off. And then when 5 guys sprint back and get a block shot or get a touch or get a disruption, they've got what it takes, and they'll have what it takes for a bit of time too. So I think realistically, if Milwaukee doesn't pull it off this year, we got a good run at Giannis, adding him to the team. He's one of the most explosive and exciting players in the league. I think we are one or 2 guys away from doing it again, and that's not to say that there's not a decent chance this year. I know everybody's saying Philly, everybody's saying Milwaukee's obviously the idea that 1 versus 1 right now I think is the most realistic bit of the playoffs, but
it's the playoffs.
It's the playoffs, man, and anything can happen, and these guys know how to do it, and they were just there, so and now they got something else to prove.
Yeah.
On the theme of All-Star, you mentioned, who's your top 5 Raptors lineup all time?
Well, I got favorite players, and then you got some guys that you maybe aren't favorite players, but Siakam's just a phenomenal talent. He's an exciting guy. He's a new NBA body, right? Like that's what you got guys doing. It's just
homegrown,
10 guys bringing the ball up,
And position is important in terms of your starting 5.
So, Gasol's a phenomenal passing center. We've had some great centers, but if you're picking guys that while they were playing on the Raptors, or guys that all time, if they had played from the Raptors, can you pick them from their prime? Like if you're having to pick them from the Raptors as opposed to from their prime, there's a very different conversation from that perspective, because you got to think like Tracy McGrady, what he did when he went beyond it. Raptors have developed a lot of talent, and all you have to do right now is look around the league and see how many guys are out there killing it that played for the Raptors in the last 5 years or so. You know what? I love old guys. The idea that VC is still doing it. I used to give him a lot of slack for just how hurt he was. It was soccer time kind of hurt at times, but to see him still doing it, you got to eat your words a bit. So just the high flying side of things. I got a signed photo of his and a signed jersey of his up at the clinic from one of the dunk contest scenarios there. Point guards, it's hard not to have a floor general like Lowry, I think. So I think passing center, that's kind of the way to go these days. But I mean, you got Olajuwon played for the Raps, so you're probably going to take him. Stoudemire was a phenomenal force back in the day too, Damon. But I'd have to go Lowry. He's the only point guard we know that knows how to get one of those rings. So
exactly.
I'd like to put Kawhi and DeRozan on the same team, because I think it would be a phenomenal thing to see. But there's a lot of iterations out there of starting 5s that you can put up, and honestly, kind of like who we playing, right?
Yeah.
Who do we have to play against? But those guys are definitely in the mix for sure. Yeah.
And the greatest of all time to ever touch a basketball. I know there's a lot of the conversation. LeBron,
I grew up in the
Jordan,
era, man, so there's no question for me that you could touch guys back then. You could elbow guys right in the chest. You could do, and you still couldn't stop that wiry little dude. And he wasn't the Jordan that everybody remembers him early. He was a phenomenal competitor, and I mean LeBron's longevity is something else, and he's just a freak. Like the dude's not from here, right? And You don't see that physique. You don't see that sprint. You don't
That
see
speed
that
and that
speed.
big.
You don't
Yeah.
see that, and you definitely don't see it approaching 40. You know, in your mid 30s. So, yeah, I think he's a phenomenal talent. But you know, I think I gotta go with the
MJ.
rings. I gotta go with the rings. You know, so I'd have to say MJ.
Yeah. So we're gonna wrap it up in a little bit, but I want to hear what do you have coming up? What do you have your sights set on in the next little while? Is it head down, pushing through? I know, you know, we've talked about you've got an empty lot back here on the lake. You know, what are you thinking? What's big for you in the next little while?
Joe tells me if I make any more plans, and the next plan she hears coming out of my mouth, she'll slap me. So she's not here though. So I mean, there's a lot of plans. I think business-wise, we're always growing. We're always adding new services. You know, we're trying to make some realistically. You know, streamlining right now and trying to build the efficiencies and work on the business when you work still, you know, a full-time clinical caseload and such a diverse caseload, you know, doing 3 days of open caseload from, you know, everything that walks through the door, heavily ortho, the day of peds, a day of home care, a day of the satellite site of Wiki, and then evenings managing and running the business. You know, the idea of stepping back clinically, despite the fact that that's why I do it, that in order for us to progress, to get to where we want the business to be streamlined and to ensure that the vision is entrenched in the procedural element of day-to-day, that's going to take a couple of years to get to that point in time. And I think once we're there, then we have some decisions to make of do we stop there or are we? I mean, our model is a very unique model in the province and in Canada, and has been celebrated as such. So, you know, the idea that we can solve some pretty large healthcare problems if we think about how do we, you know, where do we take that model is because realistically, from a rural scenario that looks at the unique elements of First Nation health needs and service provision strategies, as well as what the province has going right now, oftentimes, you know, what we've built is kind of hard to talk about a lot of times because it's not what's expected. You know, the idea, well, is this public or is this private? Well, we're a hybrid in that sense, and you know, some people have the expectation, well, you know, what their belief doesn't necessarily match what the services are out there and how they're provided. From both a public and private perspective and all these things. And what we've done is basically said, you know, we haven't reinvented anything. We've just said, and we're one of the only clinics, if not, you know, the only true hybridized scenario in this setting that has a service provision strategy that can meet the need in a very diverse setting across every different sector that's available to you, right? Mm-hmm. So we kind of at that point in time we'll have to decide, okay, you know, how much of the system's problems can this type of thing solve, and where do we take it next? So, but we'll cross that road, I guess, when it comes to it. No question that being close to the lake is always. I'm not. Whether it's Lake Huron or Lake Mindemoy or Lake Manitou, the plans of where I'm going to be spending a good chunk of my time for you know, until I die will be on Manitoulin,
near the water.
You know, as close to the. You know, I want to be able to see the water from the window every day. So that was the reason I moved back here. And it, funny enough, was, you know, one of the things that people said, well, why wouldn't you know, even colleagues graduated from school, you can go anywhere. We were highly sought after. Career fairs were kind of crazy, you know, signing contracts while you still have, you know, you haven't even passed your exams yet, and you're committing. And but my thought at the time was, I'm not sure about all this stuff about, you know, I'm interested in a lot of different elements of what physio has to offer. Funny enough, I work in all of them now, you know, from the sub-disciplines, but I know I want to be by the water, and it's been a few years since I've been exactly by the water. I'm going to go there first. I'll figure out the rest of the shit as we move along. So that's worked well for us so far. Yeah, it's great to be where we're at right now and spending time with the kids, because they're still young and we still have the many school years ahead of us and all the fun stuff that comes along that, and they're athletic kids, to see what they're involved with next. I want to be mobile and participating in those types of things with them, and I think I'll still be racing a little bit, I think, next year. Joe seems to be still not shutting the door there in terms of the risk assessment side of things. So, there's
lap times are slowing down.
Lap times we try not to talk about anymore. It's all about not
participation.
Yeah, it's all about the green ribbons these days. But more so than anything else, it's it's what it's like. It's great family time on the weekends. You're all traveling together and those types of things. So, if the kids decide that it's something that they want to do and get into it, I want them seeing,
make it a little bit easier. Yeah, they'll want to do it.
That's how it's done, and to be able to coach them through, and still, hey, if you're traveling, you might as well be out there racing, right? So, if I'm there for the weekend, I'll definitely line up at a gate if they're racing. But so I think a lot of the smaller things over the next little bit, and trying to kind of simplify, because it's been a complex time over the last decade in building what we've done. But it's also, Joe says it often, like, you don't really, the idea of taking a break, it's like, you talk about that stuff, but then it ends up being, it's not months, it's a week or something, or it's a few days, and then there's something else new. So, we've had some good opportunities within the profession in terms of leadership and advocacy over the last little while, so there's some cool stuff there, but there's no shortage of ideas. It's just keeping on going with what we're doing right now, because that's the focus, and it's been working.
Yeah, and you're right. It has been working, and it's been working. You're carving a highway through a jungle for a lot of people, and it's had a big influence on not only me and in helping my family through their pain and through the issues that we have physically, because we are physical people, but also the rest of the island and First Nation and non. It's a much needed service, and I think Manitoulin Physio and yourself and Joanna are deserving of all of the accolades and the awards that you guys win as far as your business, and I think it's very fitting. And you're making us proud. You're making me proud as your big brother, and I know you've made our parents proud, and I think making Chiging proud. So good on you, and keep doing that. You're helping people to move better, faster. That's your Instagram. Mm-hmm. So check that out. And if people want information, they can check out your Facebook page. You guys are in on the World Wide Web, if you are so inclined to check it out. It's been great. It's talking to you and taking an hour or so out of your busy schedule to just shoot the breeze with your bros.
Right on, guys.
Right on.
Yeah. Remember, folks, to fuel your passion and fuel the fire, you gotta get outdoors. We'll see you next time.